Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Racket Quest show. A lot of things have been happening around Orlando this week, but I wanted to touch on something that's happening everywhere and a lot. And I get a lot of questions about this, and I write about it, but I really love doing these audios, so I'm going to do this audio relative to what I call and calculate for every string job string bed linearity. And is particularly important when the question that I am asked routinely from people all over is, when should I introduce my child to polyester string? And I'm using polyester in the broadest terms. I know there's, mega poly, co-poly, tri-poly, all sorts of polys, but we're going to use polyester in the simple terminology to express what polyester truly is. And my answer to them, the first answer is never, quite frankly. And here's the reason why. It seems that polyester obviously is being used by a zillion players, good players, pro players, and some that aren't so good. But no, let's go back to the pro player for a minute. These folks, men or women, have really developed. They've developed a stroke. They've developed a proper grip for them. They've developed a lot of techniques that a younger person, and by younger I'm meaning from 9 to 13 to 14. That's what I mean when I say young, in terms of tennis players. And they've developed the techniques that are required to maximize the benefit of polyester, either as 100% of the string in their racket or as a hybrid configuration, which is very, very popular. Polyester in the main string, polyester in the cross string, with a different string in either the main or the cross to get the exact feel that they want. Here's the reason I say never. And every time I get a string in to evaluate, I test for modulus. And modulus, quite simply, is the premier characteristic of a tennis racket string. The higher the modulus, the stiffer the string. The modulus is simply how the string reacts to a force applied to it versus the area of the string. So a smaller diameter string or a larger gauge number is going to be under more stress than a larger gauge but a smaller number. And everyone understands that 17 gauge is thinner than a 16 gauge string, but the modulus is the number, and there's no way around it. The stiffer the string, the more shock and at impact. However, here's the rub, in my opinion. I don't string any polyester strings for many people over 42 pounds. Okay, and typically, what happens with someone that wants to try it for the first time, they say, "Well, I cannot possibly go that low. I can't possibly do it." So, invariably, they will go higher. Maybe not as high as they're doing with their synthetic or multifilament, but higher than they should. What happens is, in so many cases, when someone tries polyester for the first time or second time, for that matter, is that they think they're going to generate huge amounts of topspin automatically. Okay, they're not going to change their stroke at all, but the string's going to generate massive amounts of topspin. And when this doesn't happen, or doesn't happen to their satisfaction or their expectations, they begin to do different things. They may change the grip. They may change how hard they're stroking the ball. They may change how much of their body they're using. So on and so forth. So there are unintended consequences when this occurs, and this is where some of the issues arise. If you look at a string bed, and we call it string bed linearity, polyester string, for example, is you put it in at 42 pounds or whatever you decide, and you push on it and you drop a ball on it, it doesn't feel so bad, quite frankly. And the string bed stiffnesses, it could be quite low, as a matter of fact. But what happens is, as people are trying to generate these big, massive topspins that they hear about and read about, and in fact see from some players, they're taking the string out of its linearity curve, if you will, and at about the time, in terms of load, that you begin to see any kind of string slippage and retraction and snapping back, as they call it, also the string begins to get stiffer. I do a chart for every string I do. I try to keep it linear or below, but at an impact of about 3/10 of an inch, for example, when you or your player is deflecting the string bed 3/10 of an inch, in polyester, that's when it begins to go nonlinear. In other words, it begins to stiffen up. And to really take benefit of the polyester string, you have to be in excess of that load. And I call it load. You can call it deflection if you'd like. It's pretty much the same in terms of the graph. But if you exceed that, the string begins to get stiffer. And therein lies the problem. To get the benefit of the polyester string, you really got to smack the ball pretty hard. And it's a feature of most conversations with polyester, and especially with pro players. Something like the comment will be, wow, did you see the head speed of that? Did you see the racket speed of that? Did you see the massive amounts of topspin? These are the kind of things that filter back to the player, the junior player and the racket technician and the parents, for example, and quite frankly, adults as well. They're hearing this, they're seeing it, and they assume, and of course it's going to work for me. It may or may not work for you. And with a junior player, I certainly would recommend avoiding it until the strokes are perfected and they're physically strong enough to know they have to generate a lot of racket head speed to get the string to do what it's supposed to do. I've done a tremendous amount of high-speed photography, and it's right on the edge of whether or not these strings can snap back and generate more spin at all, given the very short time that the ball is in contact with the string, and we're talking 4.5 or 5 milliseconds, which is not very long at all. So you're expecting the string to move down and snap back up and cause the ball to rotate in 4.5 to 5 milliseconds. You got to really be humping that head to get that to occur, and most junior players and quite frankly adults simply can't do it without doing some damage, maybe short term, maybe long term. So when I talk about polyester with children or juniors, I'll put it, my initial reaction is don't do it. And parents will say, well, I can't afford it. They're going through string every 2-3 hours. Okay, then you need to think about doing other things. You need to think about perhaps a racket with a more tight or dense string pattern, 18 by 20, for example, or 16 by 19, not a 16 by 15 or 16 by 14 or whatever the open pattern racket is that they're currently using. Having said that, keep in mind, though, that an open pattern racket is going to allow the strings to move more, even though they're strung at higher tensions typically. It is going to allow the ball more entry into the grid, and as soon as that ball quits sliding, okay, in other words, it hits a string bed and it slides for a while, the quicker it begins to not slide and begin to rotate, then the more spin you're going to get. So I agree that an open pattern string bed does that. It does help in that regard. However, you're going to go through strings pretty quickly, and that is the downside. So the natural thing is, well, I'll go with polyester because it doesn't break. Well, it may not break, but it does lose tension really quickly. There are very few polyester-based strings that are extremely stable. And by that I mean the string loses tension quickly, it gets very soft, the dwell time increases, and the ball is no longer going where it's intended to go. So the counter to that is, well, I get a racket with a tighter string bed, so it's not as susceptible to that degradation as my open pattern string bed. So it's a cycle, it's a loop that we're going through right now. That I would recommend, if you're talking with parents, or if you are a parent, if you're a junior player, I would recommend trying as many other things as you possibly can before you go to a full bed of polyester course, and maybe try a polyester hybrid for a while to get started. If you are convinced you must use polyester string. If it just needs to be black, then that's another story. There are plenty of black strings out there that you can use. And if they're properly done and properly set up for the player, you're going to experience a better return on your investment than some of the very, very durable polyester strings, for example. So, but a lot of it is player preference. And my objective is to make certain that junior players can play as long as they want to play without injury. Okay, and that's what we're seeing. I'm seeing a lot of junior players getting a lot of calls about Susan and Johnny and Jimmy. Their shoulders are hurting, their elbows are hurting, their wrists are hurting, and that's not 100% a problem of the string, perhaps, but the string is contributing, and we've got to think in terms of how to provide a better setup in the long term for junior players. And I use juniors because they're very susceptible to these because they're still growing. You know, an adult, if they want to use polyester at 65 pounds, you know, I won't do it, but perhaps it's okay for them. You know, they'll have a great time and they'll be happy with it. But juniors, I say no. The farther along the line you can go before you introduce polyester, even if you ever do, I think the better off you're going to be. I've run a little bit over on this, but as always, if you have any questions or anything specific that you want to talk about, any graphs that you would like to see in terms of linearity, please email me, text me, or go on to racketquest.com and take a look at what's there. And my objective is to make sure everybody can play as long as they can and play as well as they can. So thanks very much for listening, and I hope you have a great weekend and really, really a great week. So thanks again. I'll talk to you soon.